Tell the guy that they can remember what he worked last.
Did I look for a job today? Or, I mean, it rewards mediocrity and it rewards laziness. And we want to inspire activity because it'll boost their self-esteem. They'll feel better about themselves because they're going out there. And especially men. Men derive a great deal of their self-esteem from their work. And if they're not feeling like that, they might take it out on the woman that they're living with or whatever. But it's really important that we start to go back to our traditional values.
Lisa, can I take the rest of the questions?
I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Morning. Good morning. I'm the aforementioned Rob Cornilles. I guess I've been talked about. I appreciate your introduction to me, Lisa. Kind of. But to make sure we have facts straight. And I do appreciate you, before the campaign started, offering to be my campaign manager.
No, I offered to help you with the recount, which you refused to do.
And I'm sorry that I didn't accept your offer to be my campaign manager.
Or respond.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to be here. I'd be happy to set the record straight, but I'd rather focus on why I'm running and tell you why I'd love to have your support and why I'm grateful for many of you who already support me. I was born and raised right here in the Portland metropolitan area. Born in Portland, raised in Tigard, just about 2 miles from this location, up on Little Bull Mountain. You know Little Bull Mountain?
Well, no, Bull Mountain.
Yeah, it's on the other side of Pacific Highway. That's called Little Bull Mountain. That's where I was raised for about 10 years. Then when I moved into high school age, our family went down to Newburgh, and I went to Newburgh High School. My wife and I met there. Her name is Allison. We've been married 25.5 years, and we have 3 boys, 2 in college and 1 in high school. They've all gone through the Tigard 12th School District, and we're very proud of our boys. We started a company out of a spare bedroom in our home 16 years ago. It's a company called Game Face. And like a lot of people, I had an idea. And I didn't know that whether or not my idea could actually work. So we started small out of our house. We reached into our savings account, and we began this little business. Game Face is a consulting business primarily. And we work with all kinds of companies, but the industry we're most known for is the sports industry. And I think you like sports by the looks of you today.
A little bit.
And we work with professional sports franchises. We work with college athletic departments. Specifically, we go into their operation and we look how they're running their business, and we ask ourselves, how could they run it a little bit more efficiently? How can they run it a little bit more successfully? How can their people be even more productive? Now, I'm not talking about athletes. We don't work with athletes at all. We kind of stay away from that side of the business. We work on the other side of the hallway. We work with the executive team. And over the years, we have consulted with and trained in best business practices about 30,000 sports executives all over the world, primarily here in North America. And so, yeah, we've worked with teams in the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and hockey and soccer and a bunch of other minor league clubs as well. We do work with the Trailblazers off and on. We've worked with the Timbers as well. And the other thing that our company does is while we're in these businesses, we see, frankly, where they have a lot of holes to fill. In other words, where they may have some weaknesses. And usually we discover that those weaknesses can be made into strengths if they have the right number of people who are properly trained to be successful for that organization. So we train these executives in skills that are very specific to our industry, but that also, frankly, are transferable to just about any industry. We've had a lot of job seekers call Game Face over the years. People who say, hey, I'd like to work for the Trailblazers. And I understand you work with them, and if I understand that you consult with them, how would you suggest I get my foot in the door there? Well, I'd say unless you're a power forward or 6'10", you probably need to have some skills in the business side of things. How to treat a fan properly. How to win a fan who may not like basketball or want to have a bad experience, how to get them to come back. And so we train these job seekers in these skills, and then following that, we actually, if they have followed the direction that we've given them, we would actually introduce them to our clients, our teams. We've worked with about 400 teams around the country, in fact a little bit overseas as well. And so these are the organizations that we'd introduce these job seekers to. That introduction, following the training, has led to permanent jobs, careers for about 500 people around the country. So at GameFace, I've employed about 60 people over the years. Not all at one time, mind you, and not all right now, but about 60 people have gone through our doors as employees. And we've been able, as I said, to create jobs and help people find a career for about 500 people. This election, you hear a lot about job creation. How are we going to create jobs for Oregonians and people around the country? Well, we have a lot of people running, obviously. I'd rather focus my attention on those who are on the other side of the aisle, because I consider them less aligned with me and more our opponents. I'd like to think that Republicans would stick together. But when I look at what they have to offer, I see more of the same. When I look at what they have to offer as far as candidates, I see your typical lawyer turned politician turned congressional wannabe. And ladies and gentlemen, we've been getting that for a long time in this state. You know, Earl Blumenauer, the beloved Earl Blumenauer, who's been in elected office for 40 years, he came after me recently. And he was suggesting that I was conducting politics as usual, which is pretty funny if you consider that I've never been elected to anything. I'm 47 years old, had no aspirations to run for Congress when I was going up through my career. I had aspirations to build a business and to play a positive role in my community and raise a family here in Oregon. And so when career politicians like Earl Blumenauer, who's been in elected office I think since he was 24 years old, accuses citizens who've decided, like you perhaps, to get off the couch and do something, of playing politics as usual, you know we have them scared. You know they're nervous, because they recognize that the voters are not happy with the results we're getting today. And you're ready to make changes, real changes, positive changes. Not surface changes, not cosmetic changes, not changes just in the name of the elected official, but in the way we go about doing business. Because quite frankly, what's happening in Washington, D.C., in my opinion, is broken. And as my ad has said, I think both parties are at fault. I don't know if there'd be anyone here who would disagree with that. Now, I've been a Republican since I was 18 years old, since I was old enough to vote. Why did I choose to be a Republican? Because, as I've said many times, growing up here in Oregon, and I don't know how many of you have been in Oregon in the last 30 years or so, or how many of you have moved here recently, but when I grew up here, I looked at Vic Atiyeh, who was our governor, our last Republican governor, and I really admired the work that he did, because he knew how to create jobs for Oregon. He went overseas, in fact, and he brought companies here and said, we've got great workers here. Establish an office here. And he's talked to local businesses and said, you know what, there's a reason to stay here. There's a reason to take more risk and invest here in Oregon. And he gave them all kinds of great reasons, and they were truthful. And people said, you know what, I'm going to follow your lead, Governor Atiyeh. And our economy was more prosperous. I look at Mark Hatfield, someone I watched pretty closely when I was growing up. You know, just like any politician, you can't agree with an elected official 100% of the time. Heck, I don't even agree with my wife 100% of the time, nor she with me. But you try to pick the people that you think have the best judgment, who have the best temperament, to do what you think is necessary for where you live. And I think Mark Hatfield fit that description very well. He was someone who had very strong convictions. Some I agreed with, some perhaps I did not. I wasn't as old as I wasn't that old back then, so I can't say that I could get into any policy debate with the man. But one thing that really stood out about Mark Hatfield is that you really believed he was representing you. You believed that he was a statesman. And you look back what's happening in Washington, D.C., and there aren't very many statesmen. And quite frankly, you know, when people start attacking other candidates, especially of their own party, to me, that's politics as usual. We need to have honest conversations. And at the end of the conversation, if you decide that one candidate suits you better, that one is more aligned to you than another, then it's your prerogative and your right to vote for that person. But I'd like to tell you what I stand for and not what I'm against. I stand for giving people here in Oregon a chance to be prosperous. And as a small business owner myself, I know what it took for us to hire people. It took a sense of, you know what, you can do this, first of all, if you work hard enough. And I never looked over my shoulder asking Washington to bail me out when I had a bad month or a bad year. I never looked to Washington to stimulate my business through taxpayer dollars. I just tried to play by the rules. But that's another thing. You got to know what the rules are when you're going to run a business, start a business, hire people. And right now, quite frankly, as a small business owner, I am like many, perhaps some of you in this room, who is sitting on his hands when it comes to hiring more people because I don't know what the rules are anymore. Whether it be through tax policy that seems to just be 12 months in advance, but there's no long-term predictability, there's no long-term certainty as what the tax policy is going to be, what the tax code is going to look like, whether it's regulations that they continue to pile upon us, both as citizens and as job creators in this state and in this country. You don't know what the ramifications will be of hiring more people. Or whether it just be the uncertainty that comes out of Washington, D.C. because they continue to play games at our expense. Whether it be the debt ceiling crisis, whether it be health care legislation, whether it be the Dodd-Frank bill, which put a crimp on our financial markets, and specifically, it put a crimp on financial institutions to lend money to small business owners who could hire again if they could just have access to capital. These are the games that are being played. So if you're satisfied with those kind of games, then you don't want to elect a guy like me, because I'm not. I have not been groomed to be in politics. No one asked me to run when I ran last year against David Wu. I decided to do it on my own. No one called me this year when the special election started and said, we implore you to run. I decided to do it on my own, for better or for worse, because I'm totally committed to the things that I'm sharing with you. And I just don't think we can afford more of the same. We cannot afford more career politicians. We've tried that. It's not working for Oregon anymore. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to ask for your support. I'm here to ask for your vote. And with me, we may not agree 100% of the time. We may not even agree 80% of the time. I would hope we would. But in those cases where we don't, I hope you'll still say, well, at least I know where Rob stands, and I know that Rob's going to use his best judgment to represent this very diverse district. Because I can't imagine that if my last opponent, David Wu, voted 98% of the time with his own party, and Suzanne Bonamici votes 98% of the time with her own party in Salem, I can't imagine that that's good for this district. And I refuse to be the next David Wu. I refuse to be a 98%. Because I don't think that's true representation. I think that's politics as usual. I'm tired of it, and that's why I'm working so hard to get your vote, and I'll work so hard to be your representative. Now, because I came on late, I was supposed to start at 11, and I started at 11:15. I have another commitment with people at 11:45, so I have time for about one or two very quick questions. I do apologize. Please.
Ms. Cornilles, we all know that Social Security needs some kind of fixing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sustainable in the long run.
Yes, sir.
And as a member of that generation, I'm wondering if you would support raising the age to start receiving Social Security.
Let's be very clear about where I stand on Social Security. First and foremost, I do not believe in privatizing Social Security. Many of my opponents want to suggest otherwise because they think that somehow will rile their base. But it's a falsehood. I've never suggested that I believe in privatizing Social Security. Here's what I understand about Social Security. First of all, I concur with you. If we don't fix it, it's not going to be a reliable safety net for all of those future seniors that are now paying into the system. The current seniors, the current people currently on disability who rely on Social Security, it needs to be there for them. It needs to be a reliable safety net. And it should be, because they paid into the system throughout their lives. So, touching it for current generation, not on the table. But here's one thing that encourages me about the future. Last year, you may recall, that President Obama commissioned the Bowles-Simpson Committee, Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson. a Democrat and a Republican, to come together with a large committee and look at Social Security as well as other entitlement reform. That process took place during my last election, 8 months in length. In December of last year, they finally submitted their report to the President and to Congress as a whole. For months, the President and Congress were saying, we can't wait to see what the Bowles-Simpson report has, because that would be a great place for us to start. It's a bipartisan, everybody, rolls up their sleeve and tries to get something done. So here it came out in December, and you know what's happened since then? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And now, unfortunately, we're heading into a new election season. What I would have done had I been elected last November is I would have been raising my hand, I would have been stomping my feet, I would have been saying, look it, all of you politicians who are looking for re-election, I was elected to come back and make sure that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that these things are sustainable for a country that's learned to depend on them. And we need to get to work with, starting with that Commission's report. I don't agree with everything in there, and there's probably things I would agree with. It's a very thick document, as you can appreciate. But what I think we ought to do is start with that. And right now we don't. No one's willing to get to the table with each other. There's too much partisanship, there's too much gamesmanship, and now, as I say, we're heading into an election season. Now nobody wants to touch it, at least back in Washington, D.C.
What does Bowles-Simpson say about Social Security?
Bowles-Simpson lays out various, what shall I say, options. So they talk about raising the retirement age, they talk about means testing, they talk about lowering the rate of increase in the COLA. They talk about all kinds of things. And the one part of their report I really remember is the preface, which says, none of us like this stuff. The left doesn't like it for these reasons, the right doesn't like it for these reasons, but that's called compromise. I always learned in business, a good negotiation is when both sides walk away disappointed. Because no one really got everything they wanted. And you know what? That's called government. That's called divided government. I think that's why the Founding Fathers created this system, so that no one could rule with an iron hand and say it's my way or the highway. One more quick question, if I may. Sorry to be quick. Thank you.
Oh, it's going to be quick. Our president, who has a lot of the same values as you, a beautiful family, he's never had a scandal. Would you consider him a career politician?
Yeah, I would.
Why?
Because he's worked up through the system, through the state Senate, through the U.S. Senate. He wasn't even in his first term before he wasn't even halfway through his first term before he announced he's running for president.
And that's a career politician? He was only in for like,
Can we have Republicans ask
6
the
years?
question?
Well,
That can't be a career politician. I just wanted to make a statement, because he is compared with you a lot. He's a good person, and I think you have a great speaking, you do great. But I think it's bad that you are calling him a career politician. He came in to help the people. That's all. That's just a statement.
okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your comments, too. But I'm not running against President Obama.
But
I'm running against people who I think
you're doing a good job.
who feel
How
that.
did you lose so much weight?
How did I?
How did you lose so much weight?
Did I lose a lot of weight?
Yeah, you look great.
Follow him around, see his schedule, and see how he loses weight.
Okay. Well, thank you. I tell you what, there is some literature here. I hope you'll take it. I hope you'll look at my website. More than any other candidate running in this election, my website is full of content as far as how I view the issues. I took a lot of time to put my ideas on my website. I hope you'll read them. And then if you have further questions, please, our number's on the information. Please call us. Email us. We'd be happy to answer your questions specifically. I do apologize that I need to honor my other commitment as well. So thank you very much for El Dorado allowing me the opportunity to speak. Again, I hope to have your vote. Thank you.